Hi, everybody. We're just going to give a few minutes for people to join the room. Let's hang tight a few minutes and we'll get started.
Hopefully, Anita, they're coming out of a social networking breakout room. So people get a little excited in them because they're conversations. So it might take a second for them to jump in.
That sounds great.
To the other.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. All right, people are just starting to join the room. We'll get started in just a minute. I want to give everybody a chance to move from their social networking breakouts. Hopefully that went really well and people got to know each other. We had some great topics to cover. Just a minute. So again, I'm watching this attendee numbers sort of climb. I'm just going to give it another minute before we do introductions here. Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lindy Markarian, and I am happy to serve on the WIC Southern California Board of Directors. I had the pleasure of meeting Anita Sarkeesian at an event this summer. As strangers do, we struck up a conversation about our careers. I wasn't at all familiar with Anita's background, but at the end of the day, and for several days to follow, I found myself thinking about how compelling and thought-provoking our conversation had been. In the few hours that we spent chatting, I was left considering the impact of some of the media that I consume and looking at it through a new lens. Anita is a media critic and the creator of Feminist Frequency, a video web series that explores the representation of women in pop culture narratives. She focuses on deconstructing the stereotypes and tropes associated with women in popular culture, as well as highlighting issues surrounding the targeted harassment of women online and in gaming spaces. Anita lectures and presents at universities and conferences around the globe and has taught multi-day filmmaking workshops. She humbly excludes her many awards and recognitions from the bio that's available on this event's website, but a few standouts include appearing on the top 125 Women of Impact lists for both Newsweek and the Daily Beast. The Verge named her as one of the top 50 most important people at the intersection of technology, art, science, and culture. Time magazine included her in its list of the 30 most influential people on the internet, and in that same year, again recognized Anita in their annual list of the 100 most influential people in the world. Anita holds a bachelor's degree in communication studies from California State University, Northridge, and a master's degree in social and political thought from York University. Today, Anita is joined by our very own WIC Southern California Programming Chair, Stephanie Cobian. Stephanie is Vice President of Media Services and Talent Relations for TV Guestspert, as well as a writer, producer, content creator, and the podcast co-host of Front and Center, as well as the host of WIC SoCal's podcast, WIC Wisdom. Stephanie, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Lindy. Let me just say, Anita, thank you for being here with us. Let's just fangirl for a moment. People are going to learn a little bit about your story right now if they haven't already read it. But what you've been through as a woman in America, to me, is mind-blowing, especially in this day and age. I mean, we're looking at the 2000s. That's crazy to me. So I kind of would love to hear a little bit just briefly, well, let's go ahead. We'll just talk about your platform first. Feminist frequency, that's what Lindy had mentioned, has been around for more than a decade. So again, we're talking 2000s here. Can you begin by telling us what initially compelled you to create the website and how the platform's mission evolved over time?
Yeah, I'm happy to be here, and thank you for that introduction, Lindy. That was very kind of you. I do tend to take out a lot of the like award fluff in my bios, but you know, I guess some people find that impressive. Uh, yeah, okay. So I started making videos while I was in grad school. I just tacked up a piece of fabric and was like, I'm going to talk about some stuff on the internet. So this was like 2008, 2009. Video blogging was just becoming a thing. There was very little like YouTube essays or YouTube like cultural content. There was very little of that at the time. And the reason I wanted to do it was because I found myself very frustrated in academia. I felt like feminism and discussions around marginalized identities and all of that were very trapped in these spaces, right? Academia is very alienating. It's very privileged. You have to like being able to read those. I can't read them anymore. I've been out of academia for so long, but being able to read those texts and access articles and all of that. Like if we think that feminism is something that can change the world and is liberatory, then why would we trap it in this space? So that's really the impetus. I was inspired by Bell Hooks, who is an amazing thinker who talked a lot about using pop culture in her classrooms to teach about difference and identity and intersectionality, because pop culture is the language that we all speak. It's the thing that you can talk around the metaphorical water cooler, right? So I decided, being a nerd and loving pop culture and being that kid that watched way too much TV, that I would use that as a lens to talk about feminism, especially intersectional feminism. So that's really where it started.
And I think just kind of also because you're a gamer, I think also when you talk about gaming, this is kind of pre-internet, whereas now it's kind of in vogue. You can be a female gamer, where you not only at the educated of the time, but you were also a gamer back then. I mean, you've been a gamer. I watched your TEDx talk since you were like really young. That's correct, right?
Yeah, I went in and out of games. There are definitely periods in my life where I didn't play games because gaming has a very complicated history and a lot of gatekeeping. And so there were definitely moments where I was like, oh, well, it's not for girls or women, or like, I just didn't like the games that I had access to or were available to me. So I've gone in and out of gaming, like I think a lot of people do sometimes. But I started gaming when I was 5. I would like sneak over to my neighbors, and because we weren't allowed to have gaming systems in my house. My parents were like, it's gonna rot your brain. Like that was the common wisdom in the early 90s, right? And so I would not sneak over, but I go to my friend's neighbor's house and play there. They got an NES. I was so excited.
Well, I can relate to that. I have 2 older brothers, and when we got games, it always went in their bedroom. Yeah. The games were never in my bedroom. I could play with them, but it was never the girl thing to do. I did get a Game Boy. So that was my
there is an actual, I mean, we don't have to go into this now, but there is a history. There's a very specific history about why that happened, because gaming didn't start out that way. It was very family friendly to begin. And there was an effort by the industry to make it very male dominated and male targeted. So, yeah.
That's something you actually talk about in your videos. You have a whole YouTube platform, and I would encourage anybody to check it out. But your YouTube platform, I watched, some of the videos, and you do actually say like, this game actually had a female hero, and then all of a sudden it changed and they had to redo it to sell it, and now it's a male hero and the females kind of died to the side. So I do find that really interesting, how things started and then how they changed. So, but that's a whole, I don't know, that's a whole big
I made a whole video series about that, exactly. Which you can find on the Feminist Frequency YouTube channel.
Exactly. So sticking with this one, so you mentioned like pop culture. So Feminist Frequency makes content recommendations for all mediums when it comes to games, as we mentioned, books, television, though, and movies. So, WIC largely supports the television industry. That's obviously WIC and cable telecommunications. So looking at some of the television series recommendations, there's a wide selection of comedies, sci-fi dramas, and animations. As a staunch feminist and pop culture critic, what are some of the key attributes you look for when promoting a show?
Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, I want to just clarify a little bit if I can. So
Yes.
Feminist Frequency is my nonprofit. I've been running it for a long time. We have sort of diverted into trying to end abuse in the games industry, especially gender-based harm. So now we run a hotline, an emotional support hotline for gamers, and we're building a training to intervene in workplaces around gender-based harm specifically. So that is where like a lot of our focus is right now. The way that I'm still connected to doing this work, I've just been a media critic forever. We do have a podcast and we do some of that. So we're not making videos about this at this moment right now. So I guess I just wanted to clarify what, like I got caught up in trying to make the games industry a better place somehow accidentally. But when I'm like recommending shows, what do I look for? I look for shows. So I'm interested as like an umbrella. I'm interested in shows by marginalized creators because we have a long legacy of historically gatekeeping around the industry, who can be directors and creators and screenwriters. And it's been predominantly cis white males, right? And so I get really excited when there are stories created by historically excluded communities and about those communities. So for example, Reservation Dogs on Hulu right now is really exciting because we don't often, like, it's so rare to get like mainstream media about Indigenous communities. So those sorts of things are like high level. It doesn't mean they're always good, right? Just like
they're not the same thing.
No,
Right.
and just like the decades of media by mediocre white dudes, like half of that stuff is terrible. Like, like a lot of it is bad. It's just, we put so much pressure on marginalized creators to do everything for everyone all the time that I think it's important that we recognize that like failing or creating stuff that's not the most amazing is okay, and that we should still give it a chance, right? And we need to give space for those creators to get better and to grow. Now, I think Reservation Dogs is amazing. I'm just using that as as a segue here. So that's like the high level for me. And then I look at what is the story that's being told? What are the values in those stories? Do I think that the messages that it is imparting is good, right? And that doesn't mean that like everybody is perfect and the world is wonderful and great. It just means, do I think that ultimately at the end of the day, is it saying something that aligns with my values of how I'd like to see the world? Because I think that our media has an impact on the world. I think that media, it can tell us who we are. It informs how we understand each other, how we understand difference. So like the fact that we have lived in a media landscape in America that has demonized Arabs and Muslims for decades is not unrelated to the fact that we just like very easily went to war with Iraq when there was no actual reason for it, right? Like we were primed because of one reason is because of our media engagement with both news media and narrative media as well. So those are some of the things that I look for, right? Do we get, are there interesting stories? Are there interesting characters? At the end of the day, we all want to like feel something when we watch media, right? Like we want to feel connected to characters. We want to feel angry at characters. We want to feel like we went through a journey with them. And so I think that is really important. And I just would like to see us go through journeys with people who don't maybe look like the people we've always seen.
One of the things I know that I've looked for in more recent years is I look to see how many women are actually talking with each other. When I watch TV shows, that's a lot of one woman's talking to this man, this man, this man, this man. You don't see a lot of women conversations to each other. That's something I look for. And I think men, again, like you said, the cis white man kind of runs things still. I think we're working on that a lot, but it's funny. I don't think when I hear scripts by people, they don't always know how to write women. They write things. And I'm just like, is that how you think we sound? Like,
Yeah.
I don't think that's how the conversation would go. And it's hard to kind of make them see, because especially in the media, they're not used to seeing two women talk. Men, I think, and not bashing on them in any way, except there's men who are amazing, and most men are amazing. But they don't sit and listen to real women actually chat. and that is a big deal. And in the media, they don't see it. So I think that's just my own personal thing. One of the things I look for, in addition to all the things I think you said are spot on.
Yeah. And there's actually, this is a very there's a very 101 tool around this that I think gets people who might be new to looking at media in this way, called the Bechdel test, which was in a comic by Alison Bechdel in the 80s, back when there was very little queer lesbian work.
Yeah.
And in it was like, do two women who have names talk to each other about anything other than a man? And that that doesn't mean a movie is good. It doesn't mean that it's like great or feminist, but it does show you how often that doesn't happen. Something as basic as that, and I've done a little bit of research and studies around it. And sometimes it's like, there'll be one sentence, like a movie will pass the Bechdel test because of one sentence.
And what's interesting is I think people don't realize what an impact that is. We say that, especially right now, we're doing so much in the media that it like, some people are like, oh, we're forcing that wokeness, but it isn't that. We're just kind of realizing, we need the more diversity, but we don't realize the effect it has when we don't have the diversity. I know as a woman growing up, I was like, I have all the guy friends, like that's, but that's because that's what I saw. That's what I knew, versus now that I'm older and I have such amazing female relationships, I notice it in the media. That's why I notice it now. I'm like, what was I thinking growing up? But that's what I'm force-fed to kind of believe, is that you have the one guy with the four guys. I mean, there's a show where the one girl with her 3 male roommates. It was it was a hit. And so women are kind of like fed this, that, the guys are easy and fun to get along with. You don't have the girlfriends. But that isn't actually reality. And again, coming back to WIC, these are amazing female relationships that we build. That's a big deal. It does matter what we see.
It does, yeah.
So just kind of want to move forward a little bit. So in 2012, you started a fundraising campaign. So you did say that Feminist Frequency is a nonprofit. You started, so we're getting really into the story now, everybody. Hang tight. I had a little bit of pain with you, Anita, but again, your strength as well is really emulating. So hopefully everybody can just bear with us. You created this fundraising campaign to further explore feminist issues, and especially you really go into gaming. So at the time, specifically the gaming tropes. I watched some of the videos. You do damsel in distress. Even though, again, we're all kind of TV people here, we all have seen gaming. Gaming definitely has its place in technology as a leader in a lot of things, ironically, even though it's gaming. It bleeds a lot into television.
And just to interrupt really quick, the series I did called Tropes versus Women in Video Games, it's about storytelling. So I got a lot of folks in Hollywood reached out or found those really interesting and useful. There was only one episode that was very specifically about gaming. The rest of it, like all of the tropes that I talk about, exist in television and film and comic books and narrative, literature and stuff like that too. So while it is using gaming as an example, it still, I think, was very useful to other creatives.
Well, I think because games, there's so many, you talk about like Princess Peach, and that Mario has been around so long, versus you have one movie here, one movie there, one movie there. I think it's easy to use gaming as a very big relationship. So if everybody, please definitely check out the videos.
Yeah, well, and also remember that games storylines, which early on were very limited, were influenced and inspired by the movie industry, which was very male and white dominated, right? So it's like one inspired the other, and here we are today.
Exactly.
Struggling with the same thing.
They feed off of each other.
Yeah.
And in the end, it's to please a male audience when half the world is women. So what's going on here? So yeah, so you started the fundraising campaign. You ended up with a target of massive online harassment. So can you share us a little bit briefly about that experience, in case people don't know? First, because it's a 2-part question. Explain a little bit about the experience. It's a big deal. It's a little hefty, but just give us a little bit of meat on it.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to preface this by saying I don't love talking about this anymore, because it's re-traumatizing every time I do. And I used to feel a little bit like I was like, my trauma was put on display constantly. So I will say that I have talked about this publicly a lot, and there are a lot of videos. So if you want to learn in detail about what happened to me, feel free to look that up. I've done some great talks that are very educational and useful. But the shorthand of it is I announced plans to make a video series about women in gaming, and I was hit with a enormous amount of harassment. Now, the details of that are like wilder than you can possibly even imagine. And remember, at this time, online harassment wasn't even like talked about in the media. It wasn't even talked about socially. There was a lot of like, you're making this up, you're lying, it's not real. And I'm like, but it's right in front of me. Like, I don't know what you're saying. Like I have to like, you know, my parents were targeted. I was targeted in really horrific ways. It's gruesome and it's a lot. So that happened. And for context, while it's not as severe as it was, I'm still harassed every day. And that was in 2012. So like, it's not something that has just happened to me once and then went away. So 2012, this happened. I realized that my work, I hadn't even released a video yet. I hadn't even said anything about video games yet. I just said that I was gonna talk about them, and I got death threats and rape threats and bomb threats at events and all kinds of stuff like that. So I realized that I had to integrate this work of trying to get folks to understand and recognize the horrors and the trauma of online harassment, how it is affecting marginalized people in a really intense way. It's silencing us. People are leaving the industry because of it. And what are these platforms doing about it, right? What are we doing about it? What are the games industry doing about it? What's Twitter and Facebook doing about it? So
yeah, no, I don't want you to relive the trauma. So if anybody needs to get specifics, you've got an amazing TEDx talk, Anita, where it's a short and sweet. People can
I actually
talk.
If you Google my name and XOXO, that is a follow-up talk that I think is actually better, because I was a little bit separated from the moment that it was happening. But then 2 years later, we have this thing called Gamergate, and some of you might have heard of that. So what happened to me was kind of the precursor years later to what ostensibly was a domestic violence issue that turned into a massive online hate mob targeting women and marginalized folks all across the games industry. It's how I ended up on the Colbert Report. It was front page of the New York Times. Like, this was a very huge deal. And this is when folks started to really be like, oh, maybe this isn't a great place to be for women. Maybe the internet kind of sucks for us. And, you know, especially like, it didn't matter if you were just around, right? If you were just a woman, a trans person, around in gaming, you could be a target. But folks like me who were actually challenging the status quo were even more of the enemy, right? The big boss that needed to be taken down. So it was years and years. Like, I'm telling you, there was like a 6-month period where every single public event I spoke at had a bomb threat, every single one.
So right. So how did you, what I wanted to get to is how did you find this courage? Because this happens to a lot of women, this bullying, this online, these scare tactics from certain groups, because it isn't everybody, but it is certain groups. How do you find the courage to, you continue to keep speaking, you know, and you got real threats and everything. And again, don't need those specifics to what specifically happened to you, but how do you rise up from that and you kept moving forward? I'd love to hear about how you pushed yourself in the face of all of all these things happening. Because we have an imagination. We can kind of fill in.
Yeah, totally. Thank you. Sometimes I'm like, but no, I need to prove to you that it was bad. And I like, even though I say I'm not going to do it and then I do it. But like, I haven't even gone into detail about the worst of it. So I have feelings around this kind of a question because in some ways we value people who stuff down the hurt in order to persevere and push through. And I just want to recognize that there are a lot of people who like didn't make it through this, right? There's a lot of people who like, even a fraction of what I received, like just destroys them, or they leave their jobs, or they leave the industry, or they're not on Twitter anymore. And that's okay, right? Well, I mean, it's not okay that happened, but it's okay that folks need to take a step back, that they need to care for themselves. I just like, am like a bull in a china shop. Is that the saying? Like, cause I'm just like, I come from an activist background. So I was like, here we go. like you messed with the wrong person. Like I come from an academic background. I come from an activist background. I know how to talk about this stuff. I don't have a job to lose. Like I wasn't employed in any meaningful way. Right.
You were ready
so
for it.
I was just kind of like, bring it. Like, and not in that aggressive, like it was awful, but there is a way in which I just was like, this is what I do now. And it wasn't healthy. And that's why I kind of want to share that. Like, I deal with this stuff very differently now. And I engage with this work very differently now that centers me and my needs more than like, I was like, I've already paid my dues. so I can like kind of chill a little bit now, but it took a lot from me. Like it continues to take a lot from me to do that and to constantly be in this space and constantly be attacked with things. So I started to realize that I was healing when it started to hurt again. Because what happens is you build up tougher and tougher and tougher skin that you just don't feel anything. And that's no way to live. So for me, when I started to be able to take a little bit of space and separate from some of it, and when harassment did spike up and I felt it, I was like, this is weird. This hurts. That's cool. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, you don't want to lose yourself in what's happening either, because you're doing a fight not only for yourself at this point, but you took up a fight for women.
Yeah.
And any minority in any way, actually, not even just women. So you don't want to lose yourself.
And we are asked to lose our humanity. Like that's what's happening here, is that in order to suffer through the slog of being a marginalized person in video games, being a marginalized person in Hollywood, you have to have a tough enough skin to make it through like everything that's coming at you, whether it's constant rejection, whether it's constant harassment, whether it's being passed over for promotions. And like, we just have to like suffer through that. And the thing is that you lose your humanity every time you are asked to do that in a way that folks who are really privileged or in more positions of power don't have to do. And I think that it's important to understand and recognize that in ourselves and how we're engaging in these spaces. And not to say like, don't be like that, but there is a little bit of like, I'd like us to start recognizing the humanity in, or the, you know, what we're asking people to do when we say like, be strong, toughen up, you know?
Well, I also think one of the things is because you kind of brought up like, you know, your work, you know, there's a lot of bullying and pushing down in the workplace or in our personal lives. But when it comes to cyberbullying, that's a hard thing to push back on. How do you, like you said, it's proving it. It's not seen necessarily by other people. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. And we're kind of expected just to, well, you don't know that, like these are faceless bullies. Like, how do you kind of push past a faceless bully? You know, and that's a hard thing. It's different when somebody can say something to you face to face. I mean, we know that. So how would you deal differently with a cyberbully per se? Well,
so there's a couple of different ways that I think we need to understand how online harassment manifests. There is what happens to me is it is these cyber mobs. It's just people on the internet that I don't know that come and attack me, right? Then there's also like stalkers or like domestic violence situations where it is someone you know, or it's like one rabid fan that is just like constantly like putting all of their attention and focus on you. And then there's also like different ways that harassment happens. So there's the really extreme stuff that the media always covers, which is death threats and rape threats and bomb threats. But then there's the everyday ways that folks are trying to discredit you, right? In terms of just like calling me a liar and saying I'm a con artist, constantly undermining. Like I tweeted something about the lack of women in The Mandalorian and got like 11,000 comments on that, right? Like I can't even tweet something in the middle of the night in passing without people getting really mad about it. So there are different ways that it manifests, and none of those were like, most of those were not reportable offenses against like Twitter's policies. They're just exhausting and like infuriating, and a way to discredit me, right? A way to try and silence me, to get me. I don't know why they still try, because it doesn't work. I'm not going anywhere.
Their energy too.
Yeah, I'm like, okay.
At least it isn't only your energy.
Yeah. So like, it is really hard to stop watching it as someone who, like, when you're seeing it happen, it's so hard to step away. It's like a car wreck and you're just like reading it. And with every tweet or message you read, you just like, you're taking it in and taking it in. And so my advice is just step away. And like, I'll find myself getting sucked into it and being like, okay, I don't need to read all of this. There are so many more tools available to us now because we now have a whole, like, not a generation, but like a chunk of time has passed where marginalized folks are like, enough is enough. We're going to build our own tools. So there's some really great tools that folks have built to help let other people help you so that you can step away and make sure that while feeling confident that anything that's happening will be addressed, that can like filter and auto block and auto mute. So there are tools that you can use, but like, what do? There's not a lot. We have to keep putting pressure on platforms to be better. And to improve the environment and the space that they're creating for all their users and not just the ones who make the most noise.
And I find it interesting because the media, like, well, not the media, but like social networks, they say they're doing a lot, and yet it always feels like the women are still pushed off. Like that, yes, the answer, you know, we can always take a break from social media, but it's almost like, well, it's like a woman can't wear a certain dress, you know, it's like you're making them at fault, almost like a woman has to leave social media. I know that we've had some recent, per se, celebrities who've been through things on social media, and it isn't just a celebrity thing. You know, we've had Ruby Rose, who went through a lot of like social media stuff. She went through the Kelly Marie Tran. She left, you know, she left social media. I think she's back on. Millie Bobby Brown dealt with a lot of stuff. And what I found from all these women is Ruby Rose. She's from the LGBTQ community. Kelly Marie Tran, you know, she's a woman of color. Millie Bobby Rose, she was 14. Like, there's nobody safe. Like, it does not matter. It's like across the board, cyberbullying is here. And like, we're the ones who are the ones figuring out how to navigate it. There doesn't seem to be a lot of protection still.
And look, the reality is that these platforms were built from the ground up by white men and tested on their families or tested with their friends, right? And so they did not consider the safety on a large scale of all of their users. And right now what they're doing is trying to put Band-Aids on a geyser. That is just a nightmare. It's a nightmare. And like, I don't have anything hopeful to say. I'm actually really, I've spent a lot of time talking to every social media company, a lot of free labor, consulting with them. And it's like, I am not hopeful that it's going to get better. And then we get these new platforms that come out and you're like, but didn't you just see what happened to us before? Why haven't you built in measures? Right. And so I urge any new platform that is coming out to really understand the ways that the technology can be abused and the ways that their users are going to could potentially be targeted and how they're going to be targeted. Because there are ways to build better communities. There are ways to build better technology. Like, this is not impossible. It's just, you know, these platforms, like Twitter is a dogpiling platform. The actual fundamental structure of it is a dogpiling platform. So what are you going to do with that? Right. And I think Twitter does a lot. They do a lot of policy changes. They do try to build in tech. They are really working on stuff sort of. But at the end of the day, what are you going to get people to stop talking to each other?
Right.
Like, no,
right.
that's
they
your
have
platform
to really hone in on specific issues. And this is only one of the many social media, you know, issues.
Yeah.
So we did mention your TEDx talk. You gave your TED talk in 2012. You talk about you mentioned a cultural shift happening where the portrayal of women is concerned. You said a second ago, you don't have a lot of hopeful things to say, but I'm curious, what have you seen? How has it perhaps evolved since
that was a decade ago.
Well, that's why I'm hoping there's been some evolution.
Also, when you do a TED talk, they're like, you gotta wrap it up with something hopeful or whatever. And I'm like, all right. Yeah, okay, actually, but I do have a lot of thoughts around this. I think, so the last year before COVID, when I was doing a lot of public speaking, I would do this talk around like really what has happened in the last decade, because so much has happened in the last decade. Like, I feel old sometimes when I look at, like, I'm like, back when I was a kid or back when I was 18, like we didn't have all these media options. We weren't learning about like, in school, sometimes I'll go speak at schools and I'm so like, the classes that are being taught are like you know, this cool TV show and everything it teaches us about life. And I'm like, we didn't have anything like that when I was in school. So a lot has changed. And I think that we don't have time to go into it, but there are a lot of reasons for that. The way that the political landscape has shifted from the Reagan era and how it's shifted super right, how Obama's election and presidency had really fomented what came after in terms of like the rise of white supremacy being open. So all of that is happening, right? So we're having this kind of like overall conservative swing of politics that's happening in America, while at the same time, social media is ramping up and giving voice to a lot more marginalized folks who didn't have voices before in any real way, because the gatekeepers were newspapers and magazines. And now social media allowed more people to sort of like rise up in some ways, which then created, at the same time, you have this streaming services starting, right? So you've got Netflix as like the biggest first one that happened. And Netflix started to take chances on niche markets, on really niche markets, and tell stories about marginalized people. Not to give them too much credit, because Netflix has a lot of problems in their programming still, but like that was a big deal and they set the standard. So then you have all these other streaming services being like, well, we can tap into those markets too. So we have not only all of these influencers and folks who were not called influencers then, getting jobs at newspapers and magazines, and they're writing critically about representation in games and representation in television and demanding more in ways that we're kind of buried in academia or like on LiveJournal, right? Like little blogs are now mainstream stories. And and so like that is starting to influence who's getting hired, what stories are being told little by little, right? Like let's not get too excited, because it's not all amazing, but
it's a slow moving motion. That's okay. It's slow, but
also fast.
It's going.
But also really fast. Right? Like that's the thing that's so bonkers, is when you think about it, bonkers is a weird word here, but like when you think about it, it happened very quickly. And so I'll look at like younger people today who are like demanding, who are like super pissed off about movies that came out in the 90s that we were excited for, right? Or the 2000s that we were excited for because it was the only time we had trans representation. And they're like, that was not good enough, which is so exciting and great, right? Like that's like generational progress that's happening.
Well, I was going to bring that up. I don't want to interrupt you because I know you're going, but I did kind of want to bring up generations up in a second.
Yeah, I mean, we could do that. I mean, I just wanted to like really lay that groundwork of, we've had a lot of technological growth happen in a very quick period of time that has allowed more voices to come into play. But you know, it's still, yeah.
Yeah, well, I see it almost as that I'm writing notes sometimes as you talk. Is one of the things is citizen journalism. You know, that's really what we're seeing with this technology is your social media. These aren't necessarily journalists, but it's social journalism or citizen journalism. It's people now recording from their cell phones. They're sharing it. It's now, and that's what's being shared on the news. It's not actually professional. So go get their cameras out, the Nightcrawler was a movie about the ones where they kind of did it more creative. Now everything's a lot of social, citizen journalism where people can just share. Everybody has a voice on social media.
Which is great, except half this country won't get vaccinated because they think that they're experts in everything. So like, you know what I like? So there's like a lot of wonderful stuff that comes out of people. Like, it's not democratizing because it's owned by corporations that get to determine whose voices get amplified and algorithms and all of that.
Right.
But like the Black Lives Matter movement was able to really get in front of people in a more real way because the media wasn't covering that. The police have been killing and murdering Black people in the streets forever. Like it was legal. And then now it's like kind of a thing. And now it's like technically not legal, but it keeps happening with no repercussions. Right. But because of social media, we now are seeing more and more footage, and there's accountability is a big word here, but there's, we all saw the movement rise up last year in the middle of COVID, right? Like that wouldn't have happened in the same way without social media. So I think that there is something really interesting happening around that. But again, it also means that white supremacist groups and hate mobs and men who hate women online and want to attack them because they have opinions about video games are also finding community.
Right.
And these platforms are getting built and harboring and inspiring and influencing each other, right? In creating these areas of like-minded hate. So
right, it does, it amplifies both ends. I mean, it's definitely we're getting good here and we're getting negative here. It's really
around games though. I actually have a little bit of data. So every year for the last 6 years, I don't remember exactly, but I think we've done it for 6 years. We analyze the representation of main characters in a game, the gender of main characters in a game that comes out of E3, which is the big video game convention that happens in downtown LA every year. It didn't happen last year, but we found that over the last 5 years before 2020, only 2 to 9% was the difference in 5 years of female characters in all games announced at the biggest video game convention annually. So that started after I made my video series. So like, is that progress? No, of course it's not fucking progress, right? Last year, there was no E3. And so we collected our data from various different sources when everyone kind of did their own independent shows. And it was 18%. That's a big jump. But also it's 18% is nothing.
Right.
It's piddly, right? And so I think because there's so much content, I don't like the word content, right? I want to value the art that is being created, but there's so much programming that it's really easy for us to just pick and choose the things that we are excited about. And I'm excited about inclusivity. I'm excited about diversity. I'm excited about stories about like people who are dealing with trauma. I'm excited about stories about like, you know, I mean, the first season of Ted Lasso, I've watched 6 times, and that's mostly white people. So I loved it. But it means that I no longer am forced to watch all of these other programming that were the only options for me if I wanted to engage with media. So I want us to just remember that that stuff is all still being made. It's not like that's not being made anymore. So I don't know the exact numbers because I haven't done this same kind of study, but like we're creating more space. But I also think we need to be mindful of like, what are the old school values that are still being shared, right? Like, are we still glamorizing and celebrating and glorifying police brutality on TV? You know, like, are we still making shows that villainize Muslims as terrorists? Like, we need to think about the content of what we are putting out there, what we're programming, what is being bought and what's being sold.
So what comes to the point is you are, I believe, a millennial just as I am. So we're kind of in this middle age group right now.
Kinda.
We'll give you that one.
Thank you. Do I look that young?
You do. So we're like kind of in this bubble in entertainment right now, where you've got that older age group who went through something completely different than us, you know, and they're having very loud voices with the Me Too movement and Time's Up, and we don't need to talk about those specifically. We all know about them, but then we also have these next generations coming up, the Gen Z, and I don't even know what they're calling now after that. Like, I don't know what they're being called.
I have no idea.
So we've got a lot of different voices and perspectives coming out right now. How do you see that affecting the women in, you know, on television, in pop culture, on TV, in gaming? Because you have a lot of young women who are in gaming now. I mean, as I kind of mentioned earlier,
there always
right.
have been, right? I think that's the you know,
right.
There always have been. It's just we are now louder and more visible and demanding more, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they are. I think the younger generation is demanding more, and the older generation is demanding more too in a different way. So there's a lot of voices for different things now. Are they kind of coming together? Will they unify? What do you see from the two?
Yeah, I think I have
voices?
like 2 kind of thoughts around that. I think one, it reminds me of like, we used to talk about the waves of feminism, right? The first wave, second wave, third wave. We don't really do that anymore. That's not really how we talk about it, which I think is really interesting. But like when you think about generational shifts, there's tension there, right? A lot of folks of my generation and younger are like, what the hell were second wave feminists thinking? Like they're super, like, you know, they're racist and transphobic and da 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 da. but also like that this was the trajectory, right? To get to this point of being like, of being in the political space that we are now. So I think about it in terms of like, young people are leading the way, and they always have, right? And there's always going to be a generational tension there, because older folks are going to be like, but we fought so hard for this thing. How can you be mad at us? You can have a credit card because of us. And we're like, yeah, well, duh, we grew up having credit cards.
Have credit cards.
Yeah.
Though,
And
like...
so, but now we want, we want trans rights in every, institutionalized. And that was something that wasn't a part of the conversation in the 60s in the same way that it is now, for example. Right. So I think that there's a tension there when it comes to Hollywood. So I say, but because I'm not old, but I am definitely like aging out of that like space a little bit. And I definitely have moments where I'm like, okay, but you don't understand what we went through, So to me, I'm constantly like following the lead of young folks, right? And like, or not or giving up more space, or like keeping some of my opinions to myself, because they're leading the way. They know what the next evolution of progressive thought is going to be. And so I try to be understanding and mindful and listen, right? So I think something like pronouns to older generations are like, I don't understand. Why would you ever do that? Who cares? Like, who cares if you don't understand it? It's just a thing. It makes people feel better and seen. So just roll with it. Like, it has no bearing on your existence. So I think that there's a little bit of like, older generations just need to be like, this doesn't actually impact me, and I'm okay. And I will support people feeling fully seen and fully realized, because I think that's what liberation is about. So when it comes to Hollywood, it's the same thing. You have a bunch of women who just scraped and clawed their way to the top through like enormous hardship. And I'm sure that there are some of them in the audience right now, right? Like, it was not a good place to be. You really had to be a part of the boys club. You really had to sacrifice a lot, and even probably sacrifice some of your morals and ethics to get to where you're at. And you spent so long in that space that becomes the norm. And then there's those of us on the outside or trying to get in, right? Who are like, okay, but that's not good anymore. Like, it's different out here now. Like, help us make it different. And so I think one of my takeaways for all of you is that if you are in positions of power, challenge the status quo and do whatever you can to support young people coming up into the industry, support marginalized folks coming up into the industry, because you now have the power, right? You have the ability and the space to challenge folks, where those of us out here, like, I'm trying to be a director, like, we're just kind of like, well, we're just thankful to get into a meeting and get into a room. You know what I mean? So I think that really recognizing, like, when you do shift into having power in a space, and what you can do with that, and how you can challenge a lot of these old sort of mythic dinosaur notions of what these spaces have to be.
So you have a lot of things that brought up some thoughts in me. One of the things I want to say first is I love how you said you're still young. You are, again, not specifically an age, I'm gonna put you at a millennial, right? So, and you've been a loud voice in a really great way for women, but at the same time, you know when to step back and say, when to take a lead from that younger generation. I think that's really, really fantastic. And I think something we all can learn, especially if we're not in that young generation. I do want to say to everybody, I'm in my last 15 minutes. I can talk to Anita for 5 hours. But if you have questions you want asked, please, please add them to the chat or the Q&A, because otherwise I'm going to keep going on because I got so much. So Anita, so that leads me, though, I want to keep going. It leads me to a couple of things. So there's, and I've got the question kind of written down here. So which one? Yeah, so responsibility. We're talking about responsibility here. You recently chimed in on YouTuber and gamer Ninja's comments about not wanting to play with women. So now he's a little younger than us, but he's not in that young generation anymore. I think he kind of is almost in the little time frame, maybe a little bit younger than us. And you aptly point out that influencers influence, which is actually what you just said probably about 5 minutes ago. So streamers and influencers have voices that are just as big as mainstream film or television personalities today. What are your thoughts about social responsibilities that these streamers and influencers have when creating a digital environment of followers?
Yeah. Yes, I will answer that. I think
Right.
it's really important to understand that like there are younger people and others who are like, don't watch TV anymore. They just watch YouTube and Twitch streams. Like that is their entertainment and their programming, and they watch it for hours, and they like become fans of influencers, and they become fans of like particular channels and streamers, and like that's what they do for hours. Like I stream, but like I stream for like 2 hours. Like streamers, these are their full-time jobs, and they'll stream for like 6 hours a day, every day kind of thing. Right. And people watch it and engage with them. So I think for people not in this space, like that can be a little mind-blowing and a little revelatory to understand that this whole thing is happening with millions of people and an enormous amount of money that's going on in these areas. So like that landscape is changing as well. In the entertainment landscape is really changing. So that said, the most powerful, with the most fans, with the most viewers, with the most sponsorship deals, have huge platforms. And like it is a little bit different than say like I don't know why Angelina Jolie just came into my head, but like being a fan of like a movie star and like watching all of their movies and maybe following them on Twitter. I don't even know if she's on Twitter, but
I was thinking of Selena Gomez. I thought I went to the same place you did. Like I was like Selena Gomez. I don't know why. I thought whatever. Of a celebrity too. Right.
Yeah. But no, that's the thing, is that like that social media has definitely created a removing the wall between fans and celebrities, like the traditional way. And so within like influencers and streamers and people who make videos, like they're talking to you. I meet people who feel like they know me because they spent 20 hours with me and I've never met them before. Right. So there's a different relationship, and like, and I don't consider myself in that space. My work is different than what I'm talking about here. But so remember, there's this totally different relationship, and it's so much more influential because it's like, hey, we're hanging out, we're having fun. I'm literally talking to you. I'm responding to your chats that are happening live on stream. I'm recognizing you. So I think it's important to understand that influence is influential. So when you have someone like Ninja, who is one of the biggest streamers that gets multi-million-dollar deals, like this is not small money that we're talking about, right? And he refuses to stream with women. What does that tell his audience about what is okay and what isn't okay?
And he's not, what I noticed too is when it comes out of influencer space, they're almost away from media putting pressure on them too, because it is its own kind of entity. like, whereas going back to like a Selena Gomez she's definitely more public in the media's eye. So the media like Britney Spears has a lot, media talks about her a lot, what's going on with her.
Mainstream media.
Right, exactly, mainstream media.
But there is a whole
someone
media
like Ninja doesn't get that pressure to say.
I would disagree with that though, because there is a whole media network that isn't the networks you're thinking of, right?
I love hearing that then.
Right,
but that's what I mean. It's the mainstream versus, I guess, non-mainstream. Fair.
Yeah, totally. And like, so the traditional Hollywood space has like a churn that it does that we all know and we're all familiar with. There is a similar thing happening parallel in a lot of ways for these people. But yeah, but I think what you're saying is that there's not as much pressure to be better. But also like, what does that do? You see all these dudes who are called out for abuses around Me Too issues, and then they have their comeback tours like a year later.
Right.
So
I'm
like,
sorry, I'll be back next year.
Yeah, right. And I'm going to do a recipe in my newsletter and I'm sorry, cinnamon rolls or whatever. But so, yeah, so I think that it's really important to understand that like, that happens. And so someone like PewDiePie, who is another huge multi-million-dollar streamer, can literally say racist, sexist things on the regular, get called out for it on the regular, and still within days get $1 million deals from YouTube, right? So it's the platforms that are like, well, we don't care. We care
what
that
does
they're
that-
going to bring in money. We don't care about the impact it has on the community.
So what does that say about YouTube? And I'm not knocking them in any way, but
I'm happy to knock
they're
them.
an online platform. They're an online platform, and so when they make stances often, and that's the same with every media company. So again, I'm not necessarily, just because we're all media people, I'm not trying to pinpoint them specifically, but like you said, they can still turn around and give a multi-million-dollar to someone who's doing all these things, and yet on the back end be like, I'm advocating for all these amazing things, and we're trying to do this and that and fighting the good fight, and yet do that. Is that contradictory? I mean, obviously it is, but
yes, but remember, we're talking about a corporation that's kind of faceless, right? So in my experience
Fair.
working with Google in general is that like, I've met lots of amazing people at Google who really, really care and are really trying to make a difference, but like, who's calling the shots? Who is actually making the calls, and what are those calls that are being made, and what influence and how are they hearing about it, and what are they doing, right? So like, it is like institutionally, it is contradictory for sure. But I do want to recognize that like, when you look at somewhat like a company like Google, you're talking about thousands of employees around the world that are all like, don't know what each other is doing and that sort of thing. I think YouTube like really needs to get its shit together. But so does Twitch. Like right now, if you're in games, there are these things called hate raids that are happening specifically on Twitch, which is when marginalized creators, marginalized streamers are streaming. Some people will descend on them with like racist, sexist, transphobic messages over and over en masse. And so you're live, and this thing is happening to you, and it's been going on. I mean, this is a thing that's happened, but it's been amplified this week and been happening a lot. And so like, what is Twitch doing about that? You know?
right. So we got a question coming in. I do want to hit on it in a second, but I want to go into, we probably should have hit this on the top. We talk about like, from feminist frequency. Feminist is an evolving word. What does it mean to you right now?
So that's a great example of what I was talking about when I'm like 10 years ago, when I was trying to come up with a name for my program, everyone told me not to use feminist because nobody would touch it. Nobody would watch it because over 10 years ago, it was a dirty word. It was, remember how like when we were younger, it was, I believe in equal rights, but I'm not a feminist. Nobody says that anymore. Nobody says that anymore because feminism has become mainstream. And when feminism becomes mainstream, as it does in cycles, it defangs it. It takes away the core of it, depoliticizes it. There's a really great book by Andy Zeisler called We Were Feminists Once that talks about what happens with the mainstreaming of feminism, because we want celebrities to adopt feminism. But when they adopt feminism, it depoliticizes it. So we're in this weird place where everybody is a feminist, which means it means nothing anymore. So, you know, and that's not to say that there isn't progress in the way that we're talking about issues and recognizing that things need to change and in really specific ways. But I do want to, I just kind of wanted to share that little nugget of like thinking about what these words mean, right? For me, feminism means the liberation of all people. It is the active fighting for and the struggle of liberating all people. Because the thing that always kind of made me do that like horror laugh, you know, when you're like funny, this is the worst kind of thing, is when men would be mad at feminism because they would think that we were taking away their rights and we were taking away their freedoms and we were taking away all of that shit, which is what they still think, right? But what they don't understand is that feminism is also fighting for them, right? Because they are trapped in these really archaic notions of masculinity. And we're trapped in these systems that are informed by patriarchy and white supremacy that are affecting all of us in all of these different ways. So the pressure to be a certain kind of man and the pressure to like have fast cars and hot women and good jobs and all of this kind of stuff, like that all comes from these systems that we live in. And I think feminism is challenging power. It's challenging these notions of these systems that are really harmful to us as a society. And it's about making space where everybody is free to just live and be respected for who they are.
I do like what you said. It's a liberation for all. I think that's a very nice way of saying it. We all hear the word feminine in it and we think, oh my gosh, women, like, and it isn't, it's liberation for all.
And that is also because in this scenario, men hold power. So while like feminism is focused on the liberation of women, and men will be liberated through that process. Do you know what I mean? Like I think that when we talk about liberation for all, we need to understand who the most vulnerable is, and we need to pick them up first, right? We need to make sure that they are supported and cared for in this process and prioritized.
I did love that. I do have a question here. So from a wonderful Jennifer, I feel very pessimistic about the organized hate on social media. There is a movement to stop hate for profit. What do you think it will take for this to turn around? Do you believe taking away the anonymity would help on social? And do you think the government will have to step in and finally force a Google, Facebook, Twitter to change their business? And I want to know, when it comes to anonymity, I think if viewers, if you go watch a lot of the videos that Anita has, comments are turned off. I think that's one thing, because people leave comments
which hurt us because the platforms prioritize engagement. So it's just another way that we
and it was across the board on the TED Talk, on your talks and all your stuff. So it affects you. And again, you're the one taking punishment in multiple ways.
Yeah.
But
so I don't focus on anonymity in my work. Anonymity is not the issue to me. I think that loads of people have harassed me on Facebook with their full names and places of work and the photo with them and their girlfriends or whatever. Anonymity isn't, it can be a factor, but I don't think it's the main factor. And when we focus on anonymity, what we're doing is also taking away the people who actually need anonymity, which are investigative journalists, which are trans folks who haven't come out, which are people like lawyers who are trying to do work in different areas. There's lots of reasons why people need anonymity or pseudonymity online. So I just urge us to like not focus too hard on the anonymity component of it. I think that I have been rethinking a lot around the content laws. Right now, I don't remember the actual copyright law code that, but right now platforms are not responsible for the content on their platforms by law. I think we might need to rethink some of that because it's allowing them to just throw their hands up and not give a shit about anything. So I do think that there might be some issues around that. I think that like monopolies are a problem. We might need to look at that in this country. I think that there's a lot of like elements around some of these issues that might need to be addressed in a more profound way.
Right. I could keep talking for another like hour. I think I have a Q&A here. Okay. So I'd love to end on a little bit of a lighter note. We are on time. And again, I could keep talking forever. So I don't want to keep everybody here. Can you name a few films, TV shows that get it right with regards to marginalized communities? I know you mentioned one earlier in the very beginning.
Reservation Dogs on Hulu.
I've never heard of that. Where is that
good.
found?
It's on Hulu.
It's on Hulu.
Yeah, so good.
Dogs. Okay.
We Are Lady Parts is on Peacock, which was delightful. Okay, yeah. It's about Muslim women punk rock band.
I've heard about that one. Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, you were talking about female friendships. Tuca and Birdie is an animated show. The first season. So here's an example of issues. Tuca and Birdie is this. So, the producer of BoJack Horseman went on to make Tuca and Birdie, which is this adorable, wonderful, animated, weird, quirky show about two female friends and their relationship and their anxieties and like their life experiences. It's so good. It's on Netflix, one season. Then Netflix canceled it. But because none of these streaming platforms actually share any data, they're free to just willy-nilly cancel things and make up an excuse for it. So like BoJack Horseman gets 5 seasons that's created by a man that is about a man in, power. And Tuca and Birdie are about two women who don't hold a lot of power, who are talking about female friendships and female like issues about their own lives, and it gets canceled, right? Peacock, no, not Peacock. Adult Swim picked it up for a second season. But the thing is, Adult Swim is on cable. And so for a lot of folks who have switched just to streaming platforms, it's really hard to get access to it. So we're like, can we just buy it? Can we buy it, please? Like I'm an adult now. I can stop torrenting things. Like I would like to pay for this amazing work. So there's this like weird tension around like what's getting canceled, where's it going, how do people have access to it? But that said, Tuca and Birdie is delightful and wonderful.
I love that. I think another show along the lines of the Netflix being canceled is Glow, which had a lot of female characters in it. And I know that was really disappointing when they canceled that.
Yeah.
They were filming and they canceled it. You know,
did they? I didn't hear that. I've only watched the first season of Glow. I didn't keep up with it.
Yeah, I believe they were filming and then they canceled it. That might not have been far, but
Wow.
to my understanding, I never worked on the show or anything, so
Yeah.
don't quote me. That was my understanding.
Grace and Frankie, I thought was really delightful. You never see older women, and you never see them be sexual and like be protagonists. They're always like the mothers or the, you know, the crones or whatever. It helps that it's like mega celebrities that played those characters, but I think we need a lot more stories around older women, and like their life experiences and their humanity. I loved You May Destroy Me, Michaela Cole's show. What platform was that on? I can't remember right now. Amazon. Anyways, it's incredible. It's incredible. And it's really intense. It's not something that HBO. Thank you very much, Felicia. It's really, really intense and really smart and brilliant. And it's about trauma. It involves sexual assault. If that's something that could be triggering for you, maybe don't watch it until that feels better. But those are some examples. I thought Lovecraft Country was really up and down. Like some episodes were great and some weren't, but overall I'm really glad it existed. Watchmen was really interesting. There's a lot. I mean, I think there's a lot of really great programming right now. And
they're all great in different ways. I do want to add one. Have you seen Pen 15?
I did. I watched the first season of it.
I love that show. And diverse, two women, supposed to be young. We've all been through a lot of those, a lot of what they went through and they share. So yeah. Anita, that's a great note to end on, a little positivity there on some shows everybody should be watching and looking up. Any last thoughts you want to share with anybody or anywhere where they specifically should go look for you other outside of just Googling all the stuff that will come up?
Be careful when you're Googling me. I just want to reiterate what I said before. Like, if you are in a position of power, please challenge the status quo. Please like uplift people below you and bring them up. I think Ava DuVernay is doing an amazing job of really just being like, cool, I like had success and I'm going to bring as many women up with me as I can. And so I urge everyone to do that. So I'm a media critic, I'm a filmmaker, and I run a hotline to emotional support for folks in the games industry, and work on ending abuses or gender-based harm in the games industry, which I think hopefully we can maybe transition that into like Hollywood too, once we get that sorted, because a lot of it is the same kinds of, there's a lot of overlap there. You can find more about me at AnitaSarkeesian.com. My name is on all of the socials. Feministfrequency.com is the Feminist Frequency website, and the gameshotline.org is where you can find out about that. So yeah, thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you, Anita, so much. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We're going to have Jen Kavrikas from our WICT board join right now. If you guys can all just sit tight for another minute. But Anita, again, thank you. And thank you, everybody, for watching.
Thank you.
Hi there. I'm Jennifer Kavrikas, Vice President of the WICT Southern California chapter. On behalf of the organization, I want to thank our special guest, Anita Sarkeesian, and thank all of our incredible speakers and panelists. What an amazing afternoon. I would also like to thank WICT Global sponsors of today's program, CommScope, Cisco, the Walter Cates Foundation, and NAMIC, and WICT Southern California sponsors, Fox, CableFax, and Multi-Channel News. Your support made today possible, along with the tireless work of the WICT SoCal programming team, Nicole Baio and Felicia Felton, led by our two event co-chairs, Stephanie Cobian and Lindy Markarian. You ladies did a remarkable job putting this day together. We covered so much today, but one thing was consistent: the need to keep moving forward and being bold. Few things in our industry move forward in bold ways, like the evolution of technology. The way we storytell, the way we engage with viewers, the way we collect and use data. It's all changing at a breakneck pace. New tech has enabled content to reach audiences in a richer, more diverse, more personalized, and more targeted way. And through the pandemic, we all experienced how our reliance on tech grew seemingly in an instant to become a lifeline, connecting all of us in ways we couldn't have imagined just a short time ago. Which brings me to you. The irony is not lost that this event is being brought to you by the kind of technology we've relied on so heavily the past 17 months. So to you at home, in the office, or from wherever you may be watching, including those from Europe, we appreciate you logging on to join us today. We hope you enjoyed this Tech It Out, and we can't wait to do this in person next time. Finally, a reminder to anyone who is not currently a WIC member to connect further with great networking and educational opportunities like this one, become a member today at wic.org. Thank you, stay well, and enjoy the rest of your day.